So this isn't a normal fishing video. So the other day, as I was out fishing for perch on the Barrow River here in Ireland, I came across something I didn't expect to see: a carp. It wasn't in a lake, it wasn't in a managed fishery. This carp was in the Barrow River, washed up on the side of the bank. And not only was this just a sighting, this fish was half alive. So something wasn't quite right about that. I ended up contacting IFI, which is what you absolutely must do if you come across an invasive species in our native ecosystems. And what happened after I contacted IFI raises some interesting questions. Not just about the fish itself, but about invasive species as a whole, how they get here, and what we can do to prevent these issues from happening. So in this video, I'm going to be running through exactly what happened that day, what species of fish this could be, how IFI dealt with the situation, and what's the next step. How do we as anglers deal with an invasive species that could potentially take a hold in Irish ecosystems? Let's get into it. So here's how it happened. I was out fishing for perch along the Barrow, as I previously mentioned, when I came across two lads that I actually know quite well. We started chatting about fishing, and they said that they had seen a fish washed up in the weed bed on the side of the river, and they thought it was an old bream. So I said, let me have a look. So I went down, and we all went to have a look together, and just straight away I said, something's not right. That is not an Irish fish. Saw it there, it was half alive, so like a spent. I thought it was a bream. One of the lads said it's absolutely a bream. Pulled it out, I said, look, it looks like a bream, but it's not a bream. That is a carp of some kind. So yeah, we took the fish out of the water, and according to our legal system, any fish that is taken out of the water that is an invasive fish should not be released back into our ecosystem. So do be careful about that, guys. You know, obviously established species like dace and stuff, I think people have a different mindset on that, and I understand that. But if it's a really shocking fish that you've never seen before, best practice would be to take it out of the water and to leave it out of the water. Obviously this is not great. You know, catch and release is typically the type of angling that we like to do around in Ireland. I'm fully aware of that, but in this case I felt it absolutely necessary not to return the fish, and I hope that's justified. I hope that's understood. So looking at this fish properly, I deduced that it was probably a carp of some kind, either a Prussian carp or a Crucian carp. I'm not 100% sure. I've still been doing some digging. It's one of the two of those though. I'm more than 100% sure. It's definitely one of the two of those types of fish. So yeah, very fascinating. So next I called IFI, Inland Fisheries Ireland, and this is where things get a little bit frustrating. I'm not going to lie to you. Their hotline service is not ideal, to say the least. I called and I was put through to a gentleman who was, although he was helpful, he lacked basic knowledge of our ecosystems. I was asked whether the Barrow was a lake or a river. Now, to someone who's not involved with fishing, I'd say absolutely that's no problem. But since you are, the hotline for Inland Fisheries Ireland, I'd like to imagine that you'd have some base knowledge of, largest rivers, largest lakes, etc., etc. Someone says the Barrow, if you're involved in the angling community, or if you're in a government body, which is IFI, for example, or even Waterways Ireland, you'd like to think that they would understand the difference between the Barrow Lake, which isn't even a place, or the Barrow River. And so that was quite frustrating. I was also then instructed to take photos of the fish, and then when I asked what to do with the fish, I was then told that I could leave the fish on the riverbank. That's obviously not correct protocol in my opinion. I didn't leave the fish on the side of the river. I proceeded to put in a bag. I made a few phone calls, contacted a few people that I know. Eventually some IFI officers got in contact with me and were very much interested in having a look at the fish themselves and taking it up to Dublin to do some research on it. So yeah, look, props to the IFI officers that were helpful and understand the procedure of how things should be done, at least in my opinion. In terms of the hotline service, there is some work that needs to be done there for sure. I understand that not everything is possible at all times. I do just think in that moment it was quite frustrating dealing with someone who wasn't really aware of what to do themselves. Once again, it's very important that I do say that the IFI officers who were helpful went above and beyond in making sure that this happened. Now, let's talk about who the culprit is. What could this species of fish be? Now, upon first examination, I thought it was either a Crucian carp or a Prussian carp. I still believe that it is one of those two fish, or maybe a hybrid of both. We're going to hope that it isn't a Prussian carp. A Prussian carp can be a serious concern and are a serious concern for a lot of countries in Europe. They're incredibly hardy. They can handle really poor water quality, and in some regions they have absolutely exploded in number once they have been introduced. Some populations of Prussian carp can reproduce through a process called gynogenesis. Essentially, they hijack the reproductive system of other fish species such as roach and bream, and they're asexual, and because of that they can essentially clone themselves in some sort of weird scientific way. And this sounds like a problem because it is. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case of what is happening here. This could be a pet that was in a pond and through the floods that we had recently ended up into the Barrow, and I'm hoping that's probably what it is, but should it be the latter of these issues, we could be in serious trouble. So how does a carp end up in a river where it doesn't belong? Let's run through some options. First and foremost, someone was illegally putting it in there. As I spoke to this IFI officer previously, he did mention that people have been trying to put carp into the Barrow for a while. This could be the case. Let's hope it's not. A pond escape is entirely likely. When water levels rise, ponds often get completely submerged, in which case fish is free to move wherever it pleases. Thirdly, a bait bucket release. If someone was live baiting, because it was alive, this carp for pike in this time period, it's possible that the fish escaped, came off the hook, and is just swimming around there. Maybe it was a well-intended, misguided relocation where someone said, I'll just put this fish into the river, it's in my pond, it's not doing so well, and they have no idea about native ecosystems and the impact that this could potentially have. So it's very likely any of these things could have happened. The Barrow River is not a managed carp fishery, so should anything like this happen, it could get out of control very, very quickly. We're hoping that it doesn't. But now, here is the biggest question. What would happen if carp did manage to end up in our ecosystems or in Irish rivers? The biggest concern by IFI was not actually the reeds or the damage of the quality of the river, it was actually disease. Non-native fish can carry pathogens and parasites that our native fish have no antibodies against. They have no resistance to fight these invasive fish pathogens and diseases. For example, something like the koi herpes virus is a serious issue in a lot of countries in Europe. Beyond disease, obviously being the main issue, there are some other issues. For example, carp can absolutely destroy the bottom of a river. They can uproot almost every weed in a certain stretch. This in turn will really impact spawning beds for pike, perch, trout, and salmon. The Barrow itself has seen a lot of pollution and issues with silt and spawning beds being damaged as it is. Adding carp to the situation is not going to make it any better. And finally, obviously carp will then be competing with other fish species in the area. Carp are big, they're bullies, they bully other fish like roach and bream out of the swim very, very easily. So should there be any food around, the carp are most certainly going to be the first there, and even if they aren't, they're going to be the ones who push the smaller fish out of the way. Now, I need to state again, one fish does not equal an invasion. However, things like this need to be alerted to IFI, and I feel like I did the right thing here, because if they're not, and there is a population of fish suddenly growing, that could be a serious issue. IFI have taken the fish up to Dublin, and we're waiting to hear back on what they say about what the fish was eating, is it carrying diseases. They're going to figure out how long it has been maybe living in the river. Hopefully we'll figure out whether it was in a pond or if it has been in the river for a long time. And from there, IFI can deduce further and figure out where this fish has come from and whether we have an issue on our hands. Obviously, a population of carp in the Barrow River would be extremely difficult to get rid of if they have established even a small population. We've seen what happened with chub in the River Inny. If you haven't read about that story, it's very fascinating. Ireland's rivers are relatively safe from invasive species so far, dace being the only real issue in most of our river systems. Carp could become a serious issue in the future. I love our rivers. I love the way they operate. The ecosystems are great and they're a very fragile balance. There has to be a very fragile balance to keep them that way, and I think I'd like to keep them that way, and I think I speak for a lot of anglers out there when I say that it's important that we do keep them that way. So that's the story of how a random perch session can turn into a carp finding mystery, and it was absolutely an amazing thing that happened. I couldn't believe what I was looking at when I saw it. I'm sure you guys would be exactly the same. It's a really shocking revelation. I am definitely going to be making a part 2 to this video when I figure out what has happened and I get updated. I am in contact with IFI at the moment, and they have told me that they will keep me in the loop further and let me know what happens in the future. So yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. Props to IFI for helping me out. They're nothing but great. The guys were awesome and the officers did what they were supposed to do, which was really, really, really good to see. But in the meantime, I want you to tell me, do you think it was a Crucian carp, a Prussian carp, maybe something else? And more importantly, what do you think should happen if invasive species ever show up in our native systems? Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Thanks for watching, stay observant, and I'll see you next time.